So, our first slide is Swissnex. Can everyone give a round of applause to Lucas?
Thank you all for being here. My name is Lucas. I work at Swissnex, and we're the innovation outpost of Switzerland, promoting not just the arts, but also academia, research, and startups. And we're very excited to work with Ash and Tia here tonight because we think this is a perfect collaboration. As you might have seen when you came in, we have an exhibition on right now, and it's an exhibition that is right at the intersection of design, art, technology. It's an exhibition by SERI, University of the Arts. It's one of the biggest art schools in Switzerland, one of the bigger ones in Europe. And they also really want to promote artistic agency and want to show that designers and artists have a place when we talk about development of technology. And yeah, we're really happy that we can collaborate once again. If you are interested to come back next week, we're hosting one of many other interesting events. We're bringing the professor for the future of cinema here, and he's going to have a panel discussion with 4 filmmakers on the future of cinema and the age of AI. Come around, it's next Tuesday. And yeah, without further ado, thanks Ash.
Yay! Give it up for Lucas. Thank you, Lucas. So, at the intersection of art and technology, we're a new organization supporting creative technologists here in San Francisco. We recently got a space in downtown San Francisco. Come visit us at 151 College Street. We currently, I'll speak more about tiat later on, but today we have an incredible lineup of artists and creative technologists who will be demoing part of their creative practice. Everyone gets 5-ish minutes, and without further ado, let's welcome Cuan.
Nice googly eyes.
Hello everyone, we're Kojo, and first thank Tiat and Swissnex for this opportunity to present here. And we are a nomadic artist duo, and previously based in San Francisco. And a little bit of our background. So we both have the background in HCI, human-computer interaction and design and innovation. And so before we make the pragmatic and useful interfaces, which is like for the company and for like the tech industry, but then and now as an artist duo, as we're making this ambiguous, subversive, frictional interfaces. Yeah, and so what if the interface is not just a window or a door, but it is a womb? It's a site where the inside and the outside rub against each other and leave a trace. Just like Alexander Galloway quotes this term, interfaces, which is a space, interface within the interface, where the edge and the center collapse. And it is a space of unresolved tension, and it is a space where the aesthetics and infrastructure, surface and politics, and becomes indistinguishable. And it is not where information flows smoothly, but it is where the meaning leaks and distorted and resist. And hugely inspired by phantasmagoria as a concept that Karl Marx quotes, and it is about the fetish commodity that's created in this phantasmagoria time that can hold power over the subject, and reveals how, for example, image, technology, interfaces, and narratives can create a world in which representation supersedes the representative. And in in our computer time and computer and software, there also holds this phantasmagoric power over the interface itself. And so today we're going to present Gradi, speculative wearable interfaces. That is, so there's like 4 wearables that we create. And for these wearables, we are going to challenge and expose the seams in the AI's promise of effortless interaction. And with questions from early computer, from like the punch card computer to like our phone interaction, and to nowadays AI's language-based interaction, why it's like the more complex the technology system is, but the more simple the interface is, the interaction is, and at the same time, more information got obfuscated into the background of the interface. Yeah, so we use like frictional and like a very hard to use kind of like interface to expose the politics, the power dynamics in the interface itself. And we made this piece with the support by ACC, Asia Cultural Center, and this is some of the installation pictures of it, yeah. And Joey will explain the 4 pieces in detail.
Yeah, so the first one that we'll talk about is Gradi Predict. And so all 4 of these are fully interactive wearables that are hanging that people come in and get to interact with. So Gradi Predict, this is a wearable that's head-worn, and it's listening to what you're saying and running this through a very fast prediction model. And when you get to the point, when it predicts you're about to say something that you are not supposed to, whether that's based on guardrails defined by whomever, or something that you maybe don't want to say, it starts playing your voice back with a very short delay. If you've ever been on a Zoom call and heard yourself echoing, it's very hard to talk, and this is called delayed auditory feedback. So it uses this kind of as a weapon against yourself to help hurt you. And so for each of these, we'll play a little video that shows someone going through it.
I try to doubt myself less. A lot of time after the conversation, I walk away and say that I'm such an idiot. I'm so data. I try.
Okay, and the next one is Gradi Calibrate. So this is an arm-worn wearable. And this piece, it promises you this experience, this interaction. But first you have to go through this calibration phase with the technology. And so we'll see the person go through this, but essentially the premise of this piece is that it is an infinite process. It is a calibration that never ends. You're in this permanent beta, and we're exploring this sort of post-human entanglement, us becoming machines, machines becoming us, not necessarily from like positive or negative, but this is the process that we are all in. It's not a destination, but it is this act of entanglement.
Thank you for being a part of Gradi. Before we begin, we need to calibrate your unique body signature. We will do this by aligning your arm with a celestial body, specifically Venus. Please extend your arm, point your finger, and I will guide you to point toward the location of Venus. Down, up, down, up, down, up, up, down.
So a lot of these are sometimes unconscious friction. You don't really understand that this is not supposed to be like this. And we explore this a lot. Gradi Mediate is a mouth-worn wearable, and the premise of this is that it's a technology in which you can trade your identity to be understood. So it scrubs all imperfections of your speech, anything that's recognizable, any mistakes, any accents, but you get universal understandability. It's perfect fluency, and also some fabricated memories injected in. We have some Silicon Valley memories that will be brought into this.
Does it feel like office inside of a dream?
This room feels like an office inside a dream. Like my dream of going to Silicon Valley.
Standing here with these devices makes me feel on display.
Standing here with this device makes me feel on display. And it's pretty cool to be in the spotlight.
And the final piece is Gradi Compress. So Gradi Compress is a near-eye wearable, and this piece, it uses your body as a embodied communication channel. So we're exploring when these proxies, these agents that are developing, we're offloading so much to this. We're using these as much more of our daily life. But we're taking this and flipping this around, using the proxy using you as the communication channel. What if you can offload conversation to your link? So there's actually a tube that puffs air into your eye to make you blink the encoded message that your proxy has. So with all of these are obviously very uncomfortable, weird, abnormal interactions to have with something, but we're trying to use this to create this moment of epistemic rupture. So taking something that you feel as though is truth, is knowledge, is fact, something that you've never questioned before, but be able to slightly shatter maybe a little piece of that, not necessarily with this is therefore what you should think, but for you to be able to be curious, to question these things more, to have this moment of reflection on this. And so we'll be showing this at SIGGRAPH in LA if anyone will be there and you want to actually experience it. And otherwise, we have our website where you can check out more of it, and this is our Instagram. So.
Open studio at Torrance Art Museum. So anyone interested can come to visit our studio and try these interactions and interfaces if anyone's interested. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Oh, this is big. These are your slides, right? Hi, I'm Daniel Temkin, and I've been designing programming languages as part of my art practice since 2009. And these are collected in a book called 44 Esolangs. How many people have heard of Esolangs before? Okay, so a lot of you. All right. That's great. So the book begins with a few sort of general ideas about these languages. Some specific to mine from the book, but some generally talking about esoteric languages. And the most important for me is the idea that any definition of the term programming language, there's a language that sits on its border. So wherever that line is that you're comfortable with, like, oh, this is a programming language, this isn't, there's some language that sits right at the border that's going to challenge that to some degree. And a lot of what's in this book are attempts to do that for various ideas of what a language is. So the book starts off with a set of prompts. And I wrote this before the idea of prompt is so associated with AI. These are definitely prompts for human beings. And so when you read the prompts, the book doesn't make clear whether these are languages that I've actually implemented, or they're ones that I'm leaving for the reader to implement, or that can't be implemented at all. That's all sort of revealed in the second half. But I'm going to read a number of these prompts, and for some of them, I'll show you a little bit of what I actually ended up with for the language. So I'm going to start with language 1, which is actually the second language, because this is zero-based book. And this is a language that better reflects the power dynamic between programmer and machine. Every line of code pleads with an interpreter god to act. The gods ask not only for clarity, but for humility and sincerity of desire. So this is a sample line of code. Father Zeus, defender of cities, defender of homes, defender of the traveler of those far from home, please create a loop counting from 99 to 1 called beer loop. So as you can see, this is the beginning of a 99 bottles of beer on the wall program. And we have to call on Zeus because he's usually the sort of the master of structure. If this was something where we were going to be branching, we would call on Ariadne, who's mistress of the labyrinth. And if we were closing out a block of code, what you'd normally do with like a right curly bracket in like C-like languages, we would call on Hades to collect the souls of any variables that remain. Let's see. Language 2. Sorry, it's a little dark to read this book. Language 2. A version of Python in the most Pythonic format, written to follow the path of the serpent. So this is one of my sort of aesthetic problems with Python, is that it's usually written left to right. When if we're following the path of the serpent, which is named for, it'd make more sense, oh thank you, to write in Boustrophedon. So this is how this page is written in the book. It says, in the style of writing called Boustrophedon, lines are described back and forth across the page. After a left to right line, the next line is read from right to left. The act of reading is more efficient as each movement of the eye picks up new information. Unlike a strict left to right layout, where we dart our eyes repeatedly to the beginning of the next line. Through an entire lifetime, millions of eye movements and perhaps whole minutes of our lives are saved. And I did create a little website called oxclouds.com where you can format your text this way. Because the other way it's often described in Boustrophedon in the Etruscan writing is movement as the ox plows back and forth. Language 4. Each day, a programmer records the paths of clouds across the sky as they drift, morph, split, and combine. When the sun sets, they review to glean the program's purpose. This language exists for a single program as observed by a single person on a single day. So that's my sort of Yoko Ono-inspired language. I'm going to skip this one. Let's go to language 12. A programming language where only tall, lowercase letters hold programmatic meaning. B, D, G, H, J, K, L, P, Q, T, and Y. Other letters might explain the code or hide its programmatic nature. Every text is a program. So that is playing off a constraint set created by the Olympian writers and mathematicians who were based in Paris in the 60s. And they would do this kind of constraint-based writing, like writing a novel without using the letter E. And this is called the Pritzker's constraint. The idea is that you write text as small as possible by getting rid of letters that are too tall or too short or stick down too much. And so this is a programming language that's really designed for programs that are written by accident. You can take any text that has these letters in it and it will do something. It will print something if you run it as a program in this language. But almost none are written intentionally. Oh yeah, let's go to this language. Oops. There we go. A programming language whose programs are progressions of photographs. Code is written in the change from one photo to the next in brightness, hue, and contrast. Each is read as less, which is a 0, same, which is 1, and more, which is 2. So this is a ternary-based language. Together, these determine computer instructions. So here, I'm doing a performance of a Fluxus event score called Free Lamp Events, which was by George Brecht. And Brecht was interested in combining art and life in such a way that they're sort of inseparable. So you would read his score about turning on and off lamps, and later you might see lamps being turned on and off and read it as a performance that no one's actually doing intentionally. So what I decided to do was photograph free lamps in such a way that they would produce photographs that would print his score to the screen. In other words, using the performance of the score to print the script. I think we're getting on to 5 minutes, so I'm going to see what I have. Oh yeah, past tense. Let me find this. So this is a little tool that I made when you want to convert your code into past tense to never be run again. And to be valid in this language, it has to be unrunnable, right? So this is from C#, as you can see, but it works with any language that uses English keywords. So we get namespace, hello world, public class programs, public static voided main, strong arts, system console, wrote lines, hello world. So the nice thing about this is, so this is like the only language that I actually implemented in a day. Like I always think it's gonna be really easy to write an interpreter for something. This was the only one that actually was pretty easy to write. I just look for anything that can be read as a verb, and if it can be, then it's just assumes that it is and converts into past tense. I will read you one more. Yes. Language 38. An Esolang of unmediated thought, pure affect without words. To articulate code renders it inert. Only the unreified holds meaning. So this is a language that rejects text at all. And I leave this one with you as a challenge for you to implement any way that you'd like. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to say I'm so excited to be at the tiat.place event. To me, these are two of my favorite cultural forces in the city right now, so it's just like a super honor. We are Peace-Based Studio. I'm Toshi.
I'm Liza Bender.
And we're going to be talking about our mutualistic collaborations today. We're husband and wife, life partners, but we're also collaborative partners, and we're also very different people in a lot of ways. Liza is very grounded in the physical and the embodied, and she works a lot with natural systems, and she's the most present person I know, and she's really good with space. I'm mostly in the speculative world, and I really like concepts. I work a lot with technology, and I work in the future, and I play with time a lot.
And he's a really good speaker, and I don't speak very often.
So a little bit of background on our work. I work in a lot of different modalities. I'm a media artist, photographer, filmmaker, experience producer, creative technologist. Way back, many, many years ago, back in the 90s and 2000s, I co-founded a performance video art group, Analog, Noise Laboratories, where we did a lot of things with smashing televisions and analog video feedback, but the real kind of motivation was around this idea, which at the time was kind of crazy, was improvisational video. You know, this is pre-video samplers, and we were using all analog equipment back then. More recently, I actually ran a real media lab for the last 10 years in for the future.
I also worked with him at Emerging Media Lab. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I have a lot of different modalities that I work in. When I worked at the Emerging Media Lab with him, I often did VR pieces and did. Sometimes I was the robot.
Actually, in this room.
Yeah. So yeah, and I've worked with Meow Wolf, Institute for the Future. I've done various things.
So one thing that we do have in common is that we both really love light and we really love playing with light. This is actually the view out of our dining room. And we've got this beautiful pond next to us, and the light just happens to come in, bounce off that pond, and come into our little condo apartment. And one of the things that Liza and I used to always collect as we passed through the world was something we called improbable moments of light. You may have seen one or two. It's that moment where you see a little weird reflection or a little like beam of light that's just going to be there for one moment. So we always loved sharing that. And then we said, wait a minute, what if we didn't just kind of find these in the wild? What if we started farming these? And so Liza actually started creating an optical garden with a bunch of optics and kind of trash. Which is one of her favorite.
Doodads and doohickeys in the window to capture the light and throw all the colors up on there.
So basically every day we get a beautiful light show. This actually on the left, that was the solar eclipse. We got to view lots of crescents all throughout our space. But this has been a big part of our life and work, thinking about not just optics, but natural world using water and kind of other found materials. And that really inspired us to one of the first projects that we've done in a new studio that we just started this year called P-Space. And we saw that there was a call by Tiat for the Water Future Show that was earlier this year. And Liza just happened to be...
I went to Scraps, if you know, you know. It's got a lot of doohickeys and doodads and trash. And I went through that and I found these half-dome plastic pieces, and I just got really excited by them. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but the more that I played with them in the store, the more I was like, it's a lens and it needs water inside of it. And this was before I knew about Water Futures, the show. And then I brought it home, and Toshi just randomly was like, hey, Tian's got a show called Water Futures. We could apply for it tonight. And I'm like, I think I have the exact trash we need to make this art piece. And we made it not trash, and it's over there. You can check it out later.
Ash requested an interactive demo, so if you brought it here tonight, it's interactive and you can come check it out. But here's just a little quick video just for those who don't playing with it. So the idea is it's exploring the intersection. Can I go back? There you go. The intersection of human interaction with water. So the instructions are to disturb the water, but actually it's called the resolution of water, partially because the idea is to kind of meditate as the water resolves, as it does, as water does in the world. I also like to joke with all the kind of high-tech video stuff I do, it's my analog 1-pixel video projector. Then recently, has anybody here done Dance Hack? No? Okay, we've got one dance hacker. I highly recommend it if you're a creative technologist. It's every year in February, it's 70 creative technologists,
movement
artists, and choreographers get together for a whole weekend. And just this year was over at UC Berkeley, and it's run by Kinetech Arts. And basically, you're just hacking away. And so there was like motion capture happening, a whole bunch of things. We wanted to do a piece, particularly about kind of all the interesting things that are happening with surveillance and exploring this idea of surveillance, which is if surveillance is looking down, surveillance is looking up, and we're kind of seeing simultaneously, with ICE using facial recognition, but we're also seeing citizens capturing and broadcasting. So this kind of back and forth that we're seeing right now. So we basically took I'm not a programmer, but I was able to take a pretty simple computer vision object detection system and kind of modify it. So we based the piece off of that. But it was just basically a hack. So it's something we hope to do later again. Okay. And then just to share a little bit about some of the things we're working on, kind of coming back to my roots, the idea of improvisational video. I've been getting into vibe coding and playing with some real-time AI systems. This is using the new Mirage from DeckArt, and just building some systems, trying to figure out, ideally I'd love to kind of work with some dancers and create some pieces on that.
And currently I am prototyping and ideating with lace lichen. And lace lichen, I've been very fascinated with lichens for a really long time. They're a mutualistic organism. So are we. And what they do is a fungi and an algae comes together. Sometimes bacteria or yeast join in on the fun, but usually it's fungi and algae, and they merge and they become a new organism. And they don't take from each other, they actually benefit each other. So the collaboration is very mutual. So I've been playing with it. In one video you can see it's a sped up version of it. I hydrated the dried lichen, and when it's dry it's very opaque and very crispy and very tight. And when it gets hydrated, then it re-enlivens, is what I'm calling it. And when I first started working with it, I was like, oh, I'm going to do sculpture piece, but I also was like, oh wait, I want to actually be mutualistic with this mutualistic organism. So I am trying to figure out how I can do that and maintain its aliveness and still create sculptural pieces. And Toshi brought in technology in my process. He took all the articles and science papers on lace lichen, and he put them into AI and created some podcasts for me to listen to while I was playing with it. And then also, at some point, he brought, he actually got me, what is that?
Ultrasonic mist maker.
An ultrasonic mist maker. So that's how a lot of our processes go, is we start with our own curiosities, and then one of us jumps in and is like, hey, I've seen you're curious, let me support your curiosity with this other thing. And we do that for each other a lot. And yeah, that's why we did this talk on mutualism.
Cool. Well, that's all we're going to share right now, but we love collaborating. So if you can check us out, our website is actually possibilityspaces.com. That's our design topic. Check us out.
I'm Weiwei. Nice to meet you.
Turn it on. We turn them off. Sorry.
Is it not on?
There.
It's on. It's on?
Now it is. Oh,
Yeah, the other mic's louder, I think.
Is it louder?
You have to turn that one on. There you go.
Is this one louder?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many of you have heard of I-Ching before? How many of you have heard of Book of Change? Cool. For those who have not, I'm excited to share a little bit more about this with you. So, I've always been fascinated by different philosophies and ways of understanding the world. One of the ways is through I-Ching, and just like how the West has the Bible, in Chinese the Bible is called Shenjing, which roughly translates to the Holy Scripture. The East has something called I-Ching, and in some way, I translates to change, but it also means simplicity. So it's a scripture, it's a simple scripture, or a scripture about change. Its central argument is that nothing is fixed, and the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. So we must embrace change, and in that process, we can also seek guidance to navigate change. I-Ching, you might have heard of yin yang on the very top, and it is essentially the broken line and the solid line. And you can combine them to then form the trigrams on the bottom. Each of them is a house. And when you combine the two trigrams together, you then get a hexagram. And with a hexagram, you then can decipher it, read it, and then seek guidance for whatever question that you have on your mind. I'm going to quickly zip through what that looks like, and then I'll share a tool that I've built to make that somewhat simpler to play with. Yeah, so when you combine them, you get hexagrams, and when you have when you multiply 8 by 8 hexagrams together, you get all of these 64 combinations. And you then pair that with the Lunar New Year calendar to then do a reading on it. You might have seen these on the South Korean flag too, and there are actually meanings to this in terms of why they chose these 4 hexagrams over the other 4 hexagrams for the flag. These 4 represent sky, earth, fire, and water, which are really important elements. Arguably a little bit more important than mountains or soil itself. And normally when you're casting these hexagrams, you use coins to cast each of the lines. So you do it 6 times to get 6 lines. And depending on what coins you use, you could use coins that you have as long as they're identical. But traditionally, you use the ancient Chinese coins on the right, and the combinations then reveal whether or not that's the solid line or the broken line. I'm going to run through what that looks like once you have a hexagram. What do you do with it, right? First of all, you need to acquire the Lunar New Year calendar. So what's today's date in Lunar New Year? Then you need to identify which line is you and which line is the other subject. So you could be asking a question about a crush you have, or a job offer you have, or the financial situation that you're in. Then you need to identify the 5 elements that are paired with each of the line. There's an entire process and poems that are created for this. You then kind of like configure them to make sure each of the element is paired with the relatives, the roles that exist, and you put them onto the existing hexagram. Now you have this thing that you then can do a reading on. And it really depends on the date and the month you need to correlate that with the line that you are in this hexagram and also this other subject that you have. So that's complicated.
Yeah.
It's an entire process. There are like endless poems that you would need to memorize. I have this entire book of notes on like how do I actually install these correctly. And since it's so complicated, but I think whether or not there's science or truth to it, I find it to be a very helpful tool for reflection. And I wanted to make it a little bit simpler to work with and to experience. So I made this tool where you can ask a question that you have, and once you ask the question, you can cast the hexagram. In this case, we're not using coins to cast them because it's a digital piece. In this case, we're using the current time to cast the hexagram. And I've consulted my I-Ching teacher on how to actually correctly calculate time and convert it into a hexagram. You then arrive at these hexagrams. The top one is the main one, and the bottom one is the one that it changes into. We then construct a prompt for you to then paste into your favorite element to get an interpretation and a reading from it. Because it turns out the language models are decently good at interpreting once you've identified the main pieces for it. So you can experience this at hexagram.today on the very left. And the process that I just ran you through is on the right, which is hexagram.today/101.
Cool.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. And I've also made some stickers in this sort of like vein of style. So feel free to come find me afterwards for stickers. Thank you so much.
Very good. I know she's stuck up on the
Hey everyone, I am Mark Hellar. Nice to meet you. Good evening. Hi everyone.
I'm Mark Hellar. It's very nice to meet you and good evening.
The other one's louder.
Hi.
Oh, yay.
I'm Mark Hellar. It's very nice. Good evening. Yeah, I'm going to show some selected projects. So I'm a media art. I work in media art conservation. It's what it looks like. This project, it's a photo of the ceiling. Some media art. Oh, I should say, I work in museums, and what they call media art encompasses art and technology, like video art and stuff. But what I do, since 2009, I've worked with the conservation department at SF MoMA, and specializing on the conservation software-based and digital art. I also work with the San Francisco Art Commission and the Stanford Department of Art History currently. Here's some projects. Yeah, this most recent one I did, Merge Sky at SFO Museum, and I've sat under this thing many times. It's in the United Terminal at the International Airport. And this is through the Art Commission. I have a contract with the Art Commission. They handle all the public art in San Francisco, including SFO. And LEDs started going out, and then we were looking at the wiring, which was up in the ceiling, and let's see what we found. Well, so this is what was in there. There's an Arduino Uno in there 10 years ago, because it went in when the Harvey Milk terminal was built. And we worked with the artist, that's artist Franca there, and we worked with the technician, and we migrated from the Arduino Uno, it was amazing, to a more modern DMX system. And yeah, working at an airport is tricky. You have to work between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. And you have to rent all these lifts, and any delays, thousands of dollars, so you got to be really on point. That was a really fun job, and that was really my first big public artwork project. This is a piece from SF MoMA owns it. It's Hans Hake, he's a conceptual artist. And this piece was news. He made this in 1969 during the Vietnam War. And he is a conceptual artist. This was teletype. The news had come over the teletype wire, and it was manifested as the news, a stream of news about the Vietnam War. And I was thinking about it today, and yeah, it's, you know, what was he thinking? What am I thinking today with all this news as he manifested in physical space? SF MoMA bought this, they acquired in 2008, and that version, there's no more teletype, and Hans Hake's studio, they worked with a programmer who migrated it to use RSS feeds, and SF MoMA bought it, and then I started working with them in 2009, so they wanted to show it again, and the problem was, the guy who wrote the software for this, like this business IT consultant, he used this really weird language called Lasso Professional, which is totally obscure, and it was from FileMaker Pro. Anyways, and he wanted a license fee every time he showed it, and so I'm like, no, I'll just rewrite it in Node.js. And so I rewrote it in Node.js with RSS feeds and a server. And so I did a migration on that, and it was lots of fun. And we worked with the studio. Hans Hake is still alive, and he's amazing. And so we're like, what news sources, and we reviewed them, and he set rules. And he also set cool rules. So he's like, after my death, you know, if there's no printers anymore, you could use holograms or projectors. So he's really forward thinking. And he gave criteria, which is great for an artist who's collected, to say, this is how my software or my conceptual work can be altered in the future when I'm not around. So that was a cool piece. And that eventually went on to the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Artists responded to the Vietnam War in 2018. So that's pretty fun. There was a lot to my version. So anyways, and then one of my most favorite projects was stewardship of the archives of the graphic designer Susan Keir. Susan Keir designed the first UI for Macintosh System 7. She Happy Mac, the garbage can, all of it. She made all of the UI for Macintosh's first desktop user interface. And in 2016, she's like, here, I'm going to give this box of 300 floppy disks to SF MoMA and MoMA. And we spent a year collaborating on the restoration of these digital files, preparing them to become part of the respective museums' collections. We had a lot of barriers to access their floppy disks, so it's obsolete media. the file systems on the floppy disk are like Mac FS, which isn't supported on like OS 10 or Windows. And they're obsolete file formats. You have to understand, she designed these before there was a desktop. They had like Photoshop. And so there were special developer tools for the programmers that Apple gave her to design sort of these grid systems. And then they would actually export hex and put them in the code of the operating system. We dealt with a lot of challenges, but we got it running, and these are some of the challenges. Oh, I'm at 5 minutes ahead of the rest. And then we also did a big study. You have to emulate these old things. We bought a Mac 120K, because it's how do you show these and give access to them in context today. And then, all right, real quick, Teiji Furihashi's Lovers Moment 2016. This is the Dumb Type Collective, very important media art collective in Japan. And the founder, Teiji Furuhashi, was dying from AIDS when he made these really intense pieces. These are industrial turntables you might have in a large factory. Those are early projectors. This was funded and developed by the Canon Art Lab. Canon Corporation worked with artists to do art technology stuff back then. And so these projectors, they're analog projectors. So it's one of the first video projectors. They move, and the choreography is perfect. And it's this big black room. There's all these people. And there's 2 slide projectors that are controlled with serial cables, and there's a sensor. And when you cross the line, Teiji Furuhashi shows up, 2 slide projectors line up, and he's crucified. It's a really intense piece, and you'll probably never see it again because it's shown in '94, and then we restored it in 2016. Laserdisc, it was so hard to restore this piece. 486 computer, DOS, Japanese artist who's dead. That's me figuring out. So what we had to do, because there's no code or anything, the computers did, those are the stepper motor drivers. We used something called a logic analyzer to reverse engineer it right into code. We can have AI. At times we wrote it by hand, and that was really intense, but we pulled it off. And last one, I do artistic collaboration. This is an AR piece I did with artist Jenny Holzer in 2020. And she's a text-based artist. That was at the University of Chicago, and AR was really popular. So thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Allado-McDowell. Yeah, so when I was 18, I moved to San Francisco, and you have to be really careful with art. Hi, I'm Allado-McDowell. Thanks, Ash. Let me keep track of the time. Yeah, so when I was 18, I moved to San Francisco, and you have to be really careful with art. It can be dangerous. I read a lot of Fluxus poetry and looked at a lot of conceptual art, and I gave myself a mental condition where I could no longer tell what was art and what was not. And that has led me to be involved in the art and technology space. It was very helpful to have that condition. So you may have, this is a book I wrote in 2020. So I do work as an artist, I work as a writer, I speak a lot, and I work as a kind of interventionist program manager in corporations. But this is a book I wrote in 2020 called Pharmaco AI. It's the first book that was written with GPT-3 when the playground existed before there was ChatGPT. And this book was my kind of exploration with the beta testing the playground before it was out, and it became this kind of canonical book in AI literature. And partly the reason why is because I took this approach of using different fonts to articulate my voice and the AI's voice. And so this book is a kind of exploration of the process of co-thinking with AI, and I had spent quite a number of years already kind of working in that space, working in AI research at Google, and I founded a program there called Artists and Machine Intelligence in 2015. And so I went on to write a number of other books. That book that I just was talking about, Pharmaco AI, you can really see the two voices between the myself, the writer, and the AI responses to what I was inputting, and the kind of collaborative thinking that happened in that process. And I took a kind of different approach with the next book I wrote, A More Cringe, which is an anti-romance novel about a DJ that lives in the basement of a TikTok house in Malibu and seeks love and God in Los Angeles. I deliberately blurred my voice and the model's voice together, and I had a heuristic, which was that every decision I made was going to be the most cringe decision that I could make. And it actually became a really hilarious story about the horror of romance. And then I wrote another book called Air Age Blueprint, where I kind of used some of techniques from both of those books. I did a collaboration with an artist named Allado-McDowell for a comic book called Outside, and he made all of the visuals. I wrote the script as a screenplay, and then he made all the visuals using Midjourney 4 and 5 in a kind of automated system using screen recording and prompt strings that were kind of strung together. And so I've also edited some anthologies around, one is called the Atlas of Anomalous AI, and the other one here is called Interspecies Future, from a conference that I chaired at Light Art Space in Berlin on interspecies AI. So I've been kind of all over the place with language and AI, and really spending a lot of time thinking about and writing about how human voice and AI voice, human thought and AI thought can coexist and influence each other in the space of literature and in the space of art in general. In 2020, I did a fellowship at the Lincoln Center, and they asked me to pitch them a project, and I said, let's do a sound healing opera, because I live in Southern California, and when you talk to friends about like going out on the weekend, they're like, well, we're going to go to the sound bath on Friday, so that's what we're doing. So I was like, well, that's everything, so let's do an opera that's like that. And they were like, well, what is sound healing actually? And I was like, that's a pretty good question, because I think it's taking psychedelics and laying on the ground. But that's not something that Lincoln Center will promote. So we needed to get scientists involved to validate it. And we sold out the house, which was amazing. And we did a live study with scientists from UCSD using brainwaves, EEG, to record brainwaves of Shanta Fig, the artistic director of Lincoln Center, on stage while the performance was happening. And so we had done some studies at UCSD where we played different instruments, and we got these EEG recordings. You know, this was an observational study, so it's hard to truly say something, you know, that is publishable in a peer-reviewed scientific kind of way about it. But what I learned in this process was that, well, in this particular case, that the human voice changes the relationship, the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you hear a voice, a different part of your nervous system responds to the music. At least that's what we observed. And I also learned that science takes a really long time to tell you things that artists already know. So the purpose of these kind of art and science collaborations really needs to be understood, like, from that perspective. I was definitely thinking about, you know, what can science teach us and what would be the purpose of that. And I think policy is actually a pretty good use of science for validating truth and, you know, making claims about the value of laying on the floor, taking psychedelics, and listening to gongs. So, you know, maybe that could be something that these scientists could help us all do. And that got me to thinking about what is this relationship of, so we used some of these brainwaves with an artist named Rafik Anadol, who came through the program that I started at Google more than 10 years ago, and he visualized the EEG brainwaves with his AI system. And it got me thinking about what is the relationship between AI and brain-computer interfaces as a media type, and what does that imply about the current state of media. I have been a longtime fan of Fred Turner, who's a historian at Stanford. Anyone know his work? He's a really cool historian. And so I kind of drew from his work and I put together a series of essays that were commissioned by Gropius Bao and Long Now Foundation here in San Francisco, describing a theory of media called neural media, which you can listen to the lecture at the Long Now website, and there's there are essays posted online if you want to read about that, and you can kind of get my thoughts on that. But the takeaway is I think that we have been in the evolution of media from broadcast into the internet and into what we have now that are shaping our senses of ourselves, our subjectivities, and our identities, and they do that in very different ways that are all based on the structure of those media types. And neural media, which includes AI, but also brain-computer interfaces and high-dimensional statistics, those things are changing how we understand ourselves and who we are, and that's what I'm trying to articulate in that writing. So here's one of the essays, Am I Slop, Am I Agentic, Am I Earth? So check it out. And I will just end on talking about some of the work that came out of that opera was a new iteration of that piece. And in thinking about what kind of libretto I wanted for the opera, I decided to find out the names of all the species that have ever lived and gone extinct on Earth. And it turns out there are about 200,000 of them that are stored in paleobiology databases. And that became the libretto for this opera. And this is an installation that was at the Swiss Institute last summer in New York, in the East Village. And it was an interactive opera. So we had these set pieces where you can see the names of the species kind of inscribed on a speculative monument. And the libretto is there on a platform, and visitors are invited to sing into a microphone while the music from the opera plays, or to read the names into the microphone. So this is a kind of act of naming these species and coming to a better understanding of what is the history of the Earth and life on Earth and our relationship to that in a kind of embodied way. And these are some of the images of this set, which I am trying to actualize in a real monument somewhere in some quarry where we can carve the names of all these species. And so this is turning into this kind of Christo-style, absurdist, bureaucratic process of figuring out how to get land and get the stuff carved into stone for future generations to see. And so, yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to talk to you about this entity, which is a robot. It comes from a 1920 Czech play by a playwright named Karel Kopek. It was Rossum's Universal Robots, so it's the first instance of this word. It's a translation from the Czech word forced labor. It's since appeared in all kinds of different forms of fictional media, which if you ask people what some of their first inspirations were for why they started working with robots, they'll often tell you movies. That's what I think might have gone through the head of the industrial designer at Figure. But there's all kinds of interesting stuff happening in this space right now. Billions of dollars pouring in terms of investment. I have the strong belief that we're going to have billions of robots in our lifetimes. It only took 13 years for there to be a billion iPhones on Earth, and so we're in this precipice of really giving AI a body. And as my dear colleague Liza likes to say, the technology is only as good as people's desire to use it. And this is something that I think about very deeply because I come to this practice from a slightly unusual angle. We're hearing two interesting stories about robots. One is that we're going to be more productive than ever. We will never have to work again. We'll all be sitting in our Wally chairs and being fed Soylent milkshakes and being lots of matrixified material in our brains. And like there's some version of that that's some utopia for somebody. And then the second version that we're hearing about our future with robots is that we're all going to die. And depending on who you ask, this might happen sooner rather than later. My work, where I've been working with robots now, essentially for most of my professional life, certainly for the last 10 years, is really about building versions of futures with these nascent technologies that are very orthogonal to either of those two stories. So utopia, dystopia, living forever, or death. I think there's so much more room to play, and that's certainly where I like to build. We call this practice choreobotics. It's a portmanteau of choreography and robotics. Choreography is itself a portmanteau, choreography, dance, writing. So being able to write dance down. In the time that I've been doing this went from a fairly fringe term to something that's now being quoted as lots of future jobs are going to be done in this domain.
So the same way that we had user experience designers when personal computers moved out of the lab and the research facility into all of our laps and pockets, we needed people who were really expert at getting these systems to interact with humans. My strong belief is that the main difference between a robot and a computer is that a robot moves. And so you need people who are experts in motion. They are all choreographers. This is going to be a new domain where there will be tens of thousands of people in this role in the future. And so I have this mission, which is to make these kinds of nascent technologies more humanistic, whimsical, and widely accessible, and I do it through business, research, and art. These are all mostly the same for me. They all come from the Latin ars, which is to make. It just so happens that they have very different politics and kind of immediate vectors of inquiry, but I think that my process within each of those tends to be relatively similar. I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm from Berkeley originally, diehard millennial. After a strange stint at a private equity firm in New York, I became a professional dancer at the Metropolitan Opera Ballet. That is not something that happens very often. But I became a professional dancer, and then in 2016, 2017, I started using robots in my artwork. So dancing with robots, touring with them all around the world, that made me interested in becoming a roboticist as a profession, which is how I wound up at Stanford for my master's, my PhD, my postdoc, and I'm now an adjunct professor there. And during my time at Stanford, I got to spend 3 years at Google, which at the time was the most well-funded machine learning and robotics moonshot on the planet. Larry Page had a firm belief that robots would learn how to do things from videos. Everyone thought he was nuts. Turns out he was very correct. Here we are later, and then done all kinds of interesting things since then. The project I'm going to talk about today is a piece called Manifold. So from 2023 to 2025, I had the absolute distinct pleasure of being the artist in residence at the Exploratorium, which you could throw as a rock and we would hit it right over there. So I got to go there when I was 5 years old, living in the Bay Area, and then became an artist in residence there. And for the first year of that residency was exploring, just inquiring, what are some of the themes that are captivating and interesting to me right now? And this was kind of post-COVID. I felt a lot of dissociation from the physical world, and I was thinking a lot about human touch and how so many robots that we have are really austere, and it seems like we should be making them out of materials like this, that we want to be able to lay on and feel soft and close and next to you. And so I started playing a lot with soft robotics, things that were inflatable of very different scales and sizes. And as this started happening, I realized that the thing that was actually the most interesting for me in all of this was that we all, over the course of our lifetime, with our brain and our bodies, we learn what is going to make us lovable and what's going to keep us safe. So from the time that you're a child, an infant, you learn how to be in these dyads with your parents, such that you know you're going to stay safe and lovable. And this idea of like, well, what is a robot who's employing its physical body for the first time? How does it learn that model? What is that experience like for this robot? And I started to also look at some of these really early atavistic representations of human art, right? So these caves 13,000 years ago, I was here, I exist. This is a representation of my species, I'm putting my hand on the wall. And these themes, they kept coming up, and we started playing with a bunch of different experiments, and then I literally woke up in the middle of the night, one night on a Tuesday, and was like, we're making a giant robot hand. And this giant robot hand, which we did indeed build, is going to be 9 feet high, and just like I learned over the course of my development as a human being, it's going to use AI to learn how to endear itself to the world. So it's going to use AI to learn how to be lovable. And so we built this machine. It has 16 degrees of freedom. It's got these cable actuated joints. This is Parker and Edwin playing on it. It's got an RV battery in the base. You literally could like drive this thing across the city. We actually can't fly it anywhere. It needs to be driven on a truck because it's too dangerous. The battery's so big, and then you can see some of the cable actuated joints that Edwin Lai, who is my colleague at the Exploratorium, he designed. So he's got these cable actuated joints. This is both a right and a left hand, so it's entirely symmetric. The fingers can go all the way forward and all the way back. It has no age, no race, no gender, no sex. It's really just meant to be this universal representation of our species. And we put it on a mobile base, built it right here at the Exploratorium across the way, and then did a performance with it last year at the Bing Auditorium down at Stanford Live. This sort of abstract version of the story of Adam and Eve, where you basically had a duet between Marceline and Colin for the first 15 minutes, where they were acquiring through this tree of hand knowledge a peek into the future, and then they were joined by all of these fabulous colleagues. So we performed this to a big sold-out audience. The first and only time it ever worked was the show. So for people who know what working with these tools is like, literally the entire weekend before, nothing ever worked once. And the dancers were all freaking out, and I just kept telling everyone, I promise you, that weird, strange thing will happen where it's like you get the fairy dust from the techno gods, and in the show, it will work. And then it worked. So that was really exciting, and we have a video of it. But this robot was really designed to be in the museum. So it was designed to interact and play with people, and again, learn this sort of lovability over time. Had a camera in the front and the back. We never saved any images. Nothing was ever connected to the cloud. And here are some of the kids interacting with it. So it would move around in this pen. We put it in this pen really to protect the robot, less than to protect the people, because this is incredibly soft, and we designed it to be really compliant from the beginning. So if you bumped into the side of it or anything, you could see the fingers going all the way forward and all the way back. The thumb is passive. It was on our wish list of places to add a motor. We just got way too busy in the end. But it learns all these different behaviors and then resets every single morning. This robot interacted with 300,000 people over the course of the summer. We think it was potentially one of the largest scale human-robot interaction experiences ever. Here's a bunch of folks playing around with it. Everyone always wants the robot to flip them off. It never happens, I promise. And so and also just something about the exterior. This is not on purpose, but as I was walking up here, I realized this was true. I have a piece of the outside in my pocket. So this is all hand-appliqued silk. I wanted the robot to feel kind of a little bit feminine, or at least really unusual from those, injection molded or 3D printed exteriors. I wanted something that was like fluffy and inviting. And we hand-appliqued this entire thing along with a designer named Erica Tanoff. It's silk charmeuse, silk chiffon, very feminine fabric, so super soft. So I'll give a couple quick last remarks as I get ready to wrap this up so everyone can have more LaCroix. So our future with robots. The Stanford Robotics Center is still where I spend a decent amount of my time. This new center just opened in November 1st, 2024. It is, to my knowledge, the first and only robotics lab in the world that has a dance studio in it. It has a sprung wood floor. I picked this floor. It has mirrors. This is how seriously Stanford is taking choreobotics. So this is certainly a burgeoning field. It's going to go better, faster into the future. I just wrapped up teaching a class there on robotics and arts, and I think it's just so essential that we continue to bring a lot of these humanistic perspectives into the designs of these new tools, because otherwise we're all going to be sitting here in 15 years really grumpy about why all of our robots are so ugly and annoying. And so this is a little bit more about Stanford. We love people to come visit all the time. One of the most interesting projects we just kicked off is, turns out humans are much more energetically efficient than robots are. Evolution's a good thing. We should never sleep on humans. Finally, I spend most of my time leading an early stage company called Art Lab. For some reason, the logo is not showing. It stands for AI Robot Technology. We're very stealthy at the moment, but soon not to be stealthy. Thanks, Ash. Would love to keep in touch.
That was wonderful. Can we give a round of applause again for our artists? We currently have an exhibition in our space called tiat.place. Tomorrow is the last day to catch it. Currently we have 26 esoteric clocks in the space from artists based in New York, Berlin, Shanghai, Singapore, using time as a medium. And then we just opened an open call for our next exhibition in the space, which is about computational divinity, network spirituality, machines, and rituals and religion. So if that's an interesting theme for you, we welcome you to apply to the show. If you'd like to come to more of our events, subscribe to our calendar. Tomorrow we'll have Kay talking about images in the age of post-AI. I'm very, very excited. We'll also have a strudel class on Saturday as well, a computational poetry meetup next week, a new pop-up exhibition for a artist incubator we've been running, and so much more. If you just subscribe to our newsletter, you'll be in the know. This QR code has links to everything that I just mentioned, and yeah, I think we have the space for a little bit longer. You're welcome to take a drink. Please check out the exhibition. It's really a wonderful curation. of artworks. And yeah, thank you so much for coming in. I hope you had a good time.